Take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
CannabisRadio.com presents The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Hey, this is great, man.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Monday, March 7th, 2016, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. So glad you could join us today for another great week of shows here on CannabisRadio.com. We are the home of the best in marijuana podcasting and live radio, including our newest show, the Tommy Chong Podcast, which is available exclusively on CannabisRadio.com and heard live on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific Time, 9 p.m. Eastern. So check that out. You can catch it on our Cannabis Radio live feed. Also, speaking of live shows, we've got the Stoner Jesus Show. You can catch that at 5 o'clock Pacific, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And of course, this show every weekday, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Pacific. Also podcasting on Cannabis Radio, you'll hear Vivian McPeak with Hemp Present, Dr. Mitch Earlywine with The Grow Show, Dr. Dina with Cannabis Confidential, Dave Inman with State of Cannabis, and so many more. If you want to know about medical marijuana, industrial hemp, consumer cannabis, activism, advocacy, politics, news, religion, anything that has to do with weed, it's right here on CannabisRadio.com. Before we get into the show today, I have to make mention of the passing of former First Lady Nancy Reagan. And some people, you know, they hear something like that and they react to it in a kind of a celebratory way because she was such an anti-drug zealot. She, you know, created the Just Say No campaign and so forth. But I want to take this opportunity for us to think about our enemies. Shall we call them enemies? Our opponents, I think is a better term. And recognize that the people that oppose us, by and large, aren't evil, right? Most of them are ignorant or miseducated. And I would put Nancy Reagan in that category. Her goal with Just Say No wasn't to make our lives miserable and to set the foundation for mass incarceration and so forth, or to enrich a bunch of companies or be part of some conspiracy to keep hemp down or anything like that. And I'm not saying those things don't exist. I'm just saying that someone like Nancy Reagan, I don't think she was that manipulative of a person. I think she was genuinely concerned about the problems with drugs and genuinely wanted to help kids. I really believe that. Now, she was completely misguided and absolutely wrong on how to help those kids. But I don't celebrate her death like she was some sort of evil witch or something like that. I don't think she knew better. Now, someone like Michelle Lenhart, the former DEA administrator, that's someone who knows better. Anyway, coming up on today's show, speaking of Dr. Mitch Earlywine earlier, we have the Cannabis Q&A segment coming up at 12:30, but Dr. Mitch won't be joining us. We'll be speaking to his student, Melissa Slavin. She'll be on the line, and she's revealing some of the data they've collected on cannabis use by middle-aged women undergoing menopause. And this is a subject that first got brought up years ago when I was doing Normal's show, and our good friend Lively Libra, also known as Lisa, she was bringing this question up often, and we thought it deserved some study. We finally got some study done, and we'll give you the results coming up at 12:30. Also on the show today, we'll take a look at the most recent cancellation of the Cannabis Cup, this time in Denver, and lament how much work we still have yet to do for legalization. We've got to look at Border Patrol seizures of cannabis since legalization. Guess which direction those have gone. And more shenanigans as the banking industry puts the clamps to normal for advocating legalization. It's all coming up on The Russ Belville Show.
This is The Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Dr. Dabber, hurry! Its temperature is shooting past 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's burning up.
I'm afraid for this little guy, it's just too late.
What caused the problem?
Only Dr. Dabber can maintain the perfect temperature for a smooth-tasting, slower burn. This standard vaporizer lost all of its health benefits, sending it up in smoke.
So you're telling me that most vapor pens burn so hot they produce smoke, not vapor?
Correct. Keep away from those standard vaporizer pens and turn to Dr. Dabber. Doctor's orders.
Less heat, more flavor.
Growing green to generate more green.
Hello to all you happy herbalizers, smiling trippy hippies, and everyone who believes in freedom and tolerance. This is The Grow Show, and I'm Kyle Cushman.
From food to fuel, from remedy to resource.
Welcome my guest, Ed Rosenthal, the guru of ganja. Let me ask you, right now I hear your lighter clicking. Are you smoking indoor or are you smoking sun-grown?
What am I smoking? I'm smoking concentrate.
Way to get out of the answer there. So you're truly like the king, right? You just clap your hands and somebody brings you a bowl and you're all set, right?
I wish that were the case.
The Grow Show with Kyle Cushman, only on CannabisRadio.com.
When you are starting up a medical cannabis business, you want a fired-up lawyer who understands the needs of cannabis consumers. The law office of Lauren Vasquez is your fired-up lawyer for the cannabis industry. Visit her website, fireduplawyer.com, or call 1-855-MMJ-LAWS for more information. That's 855-665-5297 for Lauren Vasquez, your fired-up lawyer, or email fireduplawyer@gmail.com.
It's time for the Cannabis Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Cannabis Radio News is now available exclusively at CannabisRadio.com. Now your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is Cannabis Radio News.
This is your Cannabis Radio News for Monday, March 7th, 2016. Governor Kate Brown has signed 2 bills that make key changes to Oregon's recreational marijuana program, including one that removes a 2-year residency requirement for marijuana licensees and another that aims to draw small medical growers into the regulated system. Brown signed Senate Bill 1598, which also adds medical and research marijuana grows as recognized farm crops, clarifies that home medical marijuana grows aren't subject to inspection, and creates a subcategory of dispensaries for nonprofits that may accept excess marijuana from growers and sell to patients for little or no cost. And she signed House Bill 4014, which also reduces annual medical marijuana card registration fees for veterans from $200 to $20 and treats medical marijuana the same as prescription drugs for people under correctional supervision. Senate Bill 1511, which allows dispensaries to sell marijuana-infused edibles and concentrates earlier than planned, and House Bill 4094, which allow banks and credit unions to deal with legal pot businesses without facing criminal liability, are still awaiting her signature. The U.S. Supreme Court did not make a decision Monday on whether to hear a lawsuit brought against Colorado over marijuana legalization. The nation's highest court had been scheduled on Friday to privately discuss the lawsuit brought by the neighboring states of Nebraska and Oklahoma, but a list of Supreme Court orders released on Monday made no mention of the case. Nebraska and Oklahoma say Colorado's licensing of marijuana stores impermissibly conflicts with federal law and creates burdens for them by increasing the amount of pot coming across their borders. Because the lawsuit involves a dispute between states, it was filed directly to the Supreme Court. The first step in the lawsuit is for the justices to decide whether they even want to consider the suit. A trio of the state's major power brokers is opposed to the coming proposal to legalize marijuana in Massachusetts, saying it would be dangerous and expensive in an op-ed in the Boston Globe. Quote, "The question before us now is whether marijuana should be fully legal and widely available for commercial sale," write Governor Charlie Baker, Boston Mayor Marty Walsh, and Attorney General Maura Healey. "We think the answer is no," end quote. This November, Massachusetts residents will be able to vote on a ballot question that would regulate and tax the sale of marijuana for recreational purposes. They argue that legalizing marijuana makes it more likely for young people to use marijuana and that marijuana-related emergency room visits and marijuana-related traffic deaths increased in Colorado. Los Angeles Rams running back Trey Mason was subdued with a stun gun twice when he refused to cooperate with officers who were arresting him in South Florida for reckless driving and marijuana possession, police in Hollywood, Florida said Sunday. Mason refused orders to get out of his Porsche sports car Saturday afternoon after he was pulled over for going more than twice the speed limit in a 35-mile-per-hour zone along a beachside road, according to a police report released by the Hollywood Police Department. Mason refused to give the patrol officer his name or provide identification, and the officer smelled marijuana in the car. Mason is charged with resisting arrest without violence, reckless driving, possession of less than 20 grams of cannabis, and failure to register a vehicle. The manufacturing of industrial hemp for commercial purposes has been legalized in Virginia. Governor Terry McAuliffe signed the bill after it passed the General Assembly 138-0. This bill will allow farmers to legally manufacture industrial hemp products. The law will go into effect July 1st, 2016, according to the Virginia Industrial Hemp Coalition. Virginia will now join several other states that allow cultivation, production, and/or manufacturing of hemp products. The new bill redefines industrial hemp as an agricultural commodity and allows licensed growers to cultivate the plant. A bill to allow private farmers to grow and sell industrial hemp through permits from the State Department of Agriculture has unanimously passed the Hawaii State House of Representatives and will cross over to the Senate. Representative Kaniela Ing, who wrote and introduced the bill along with 34 of his colleagues, called the measure, quote, the most robust industrial hemp bill being considered this year, end quote, saying it follows models in Kentucky and Colorado to legalize industrial hemp to the full extent as permitted by federal law by requiring all growers to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the State Department of Agriculture. This has been your Cannabis Radio News for Monday, March 7th, 2016. I'm Russ Belville.
Ganjapreneur.com, your guide to the cannabis business world. Ganjapreneur.com is a comprehensive resource for cannabis professionals and entrepreneurs. Download the Ganjapreneur app on your smartphone or tablet to catch up on cannabis industry news, scroll through our daily job listings, and learn about successful cannabis companies, executives, and investors. Ganjapreneur.com, helping ganjapreneurs grow.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
And if standing for the Constitution make you a wacko bird, then I am a very, very proud wacko bird.
Okay. Maybe you're high, too.
At midnight, July 1st, 2015, adult marijuana prohibition came to an end in Oregon. Immediately, over 400,000 adults who consume cannabis responsibly were no longer criminals. This is what freedom sounds like. Brought to you by Portland Normal. Are you playing an acoustic guitar but want to be louder without an amp? Try a resonator guitar. The fingerboard extension has National Resophonic and other resonators, square necks and round necks. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com. Go wild hog in the woods.
The world of cannabis is evolving at a frenetic pace. The Russ Belville Show gets behind the headlines to take a deeper look at breaking news in our Cannabis Focus.
Today in the Cannabis Focus, we look back to my friends and mentors at the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, aka NORML. We're big fans of NORML here at the Russ Belville Show and CannabisRadio.com, and I'm reading today's column by NORML founder and my personal friend Keith Stroup about how NORML has lost its credit card services. They are, or were, serviced by a company called TransFirst, one of these credit card processors. And according to Keith's column, there was no advance notice. They got a registered mail last week that TransFirst was no longer going to process their credit card traffic. Now, this is a huge problem for Normal because they take a lot of donations online through credit or debit cards. They sell all sorts of swag online using credit and debit cards, and now they cannot do so. And the reason why, given by TransFirst, was the content of their website. Some mid-level executive from TransFirst logged on to normal.org and saw that it had marijuana leaves or was talking about marijuana. And Keith calls them up and asks, well, what's the deal? Why are you canceling our account? And according to TransFirst, they said they're part of the marijuana industry. So TransFirst felt like it had to cancel Normal's account because Normal's part of the marijuana industry. Now, understand, Normal's a nonprofit and does not sell a single bit of marijuana. They're not a dispensary. They're not a dispensary locator service. They're not a medical marijuana doctor referral service. They're an advocacy group, a political advocacy group. And what has happened here is some financial corporation has decided, based on the content of the website, advocating for a change in law, that nonprofit shouldn't be able to process credit cards. And it's not as if, there's a lot of this question about the banking industry and people worrying, the banks that close accounts and so forth for dispensaries because, they worry about those federal problems. There's no federal problem with Normal. There's absolutely no penalty the federal government could issue to TransFirst for handling Normal's credit card business. Normal is a First Amendment political nonprofit advocacy organization, and it's been taking credit cards for decades now. It was taking credit cards in the 80s when we were really, really anti-pot, remember? It was taking credit cards in the 90s when they were really, really anti-pot. It's remarkable to me that as marijuana becomes more and more legal and more accepted by the general public, we're finding it to be more and more restricted in some ways. Stay tuned for the Radical Rant. At the end of the show, we'll talk about another aspect of this, the idea of cannabis clubs, cannabis cafes, pot lounges, cannabis cups, hemp fests, festivals. We'll talk about how those have been affected. But this is just ridiculous. Now, Normal's currently looking for another credit card processor, and I don't think they'll have much problem. But this should anger everybody, not just people that are fans of marijuana legalization, but people who are fans of the First Amendment, people who are fans of our political speech rights, because Normal's being punished here just for their political views. Now, a lot of people will say, First Amendment, you can't censor people, but that has to do with the government. There's nothing about the First Amendment that forces a company to have to provide services to somebody. If this credit card company, say, was, run by the Koch brothers, they might refuse business from liberals. Who knows? But it's certainly anti-American, even if it's not unconstitutional. It's definitely anti-American for this company to effectively be censoring, to effectively be silencing, or at least to be impeding the progress of Normal in being able to change these marijuana laws. It also comes as Normal's gearing up for the presidential primary season and preparing a public relations blast to inform marijuana voters about their choices, their primaries, and which candidates, where the candidates stand on marijuana issues. I'm not floating some sort of conspiracy theory like they're purposely picking the timing here to try to interrupt Normal's mission, to try to deny cannabis-friendly voters the information they need to make informed choices. I'm not saying it's a conspiracy. I'm just saying it's bloody good timing. if that was the goal, it's bloody good timing, isn't it? Shut Normal down just as they're getting ready for this big blitz on the primaries. It's just a shame, and let's hope that Normal gets their credit card services back. And when they do, I'll let you know so you can make a big donation.
Well, what the hell is supposed to do, you moron?
You're supposed to register, you're supposed to vote. Happy 420 to the Mountain Time Zone, and news for you primary followers. Tomorrow, Michigan votes, and Bernie Sanders has just pulled to within 5 points of Hillary Clinton. He was down by 30. He's pulled to within 5, according to the latest Michigan State poll. We're back with some Border Patrol seizure data right after this.
Dr. Dabber, hurry! Its temperature is shooting past 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's burning up.
I'm afraid for this little guy, it's just too late.
What caused the problem?
Only Dr. Dabber can maintain the perfect temperature for a smooth-tasting, slower burn. This standard vaporizer lost all of its health benefits, sending it up in smoke.
So you're telling me that most vapor pens burn so hot they produce smoke, not vapor?
Correct. Keep away from those standard vaporizer pens and turn to Dr. Dabber. Doctor's orders.
Less heat, more flavor.
Get the latest updates on the Russ Belville Show by following Radical Russ on Twitter and liking the Russ Belville Show on Facebook.
Educator, author, and advocate Dr. Mitch Earlywine is here to tackle the burning issues.
And I'm here to clear up the myths about cannabis and burn them away with science.
CannabisRadio.com presents a no-holds-barred platform that seeks to redefine and revolutionize the entire scope of the cannabis culture while opening the door for more to join the cannabis crusade.
Dr. Kevin Hill.
You can't ignore the fact that, like alcohol, most people who use don't have a problem. So I think that you need to think about policy in that way while educating people properly about marijuana. I think that's the way to go.
Burning Issues, only on CannabisRadio.com.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
Promoting the end of adult cannabis prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It's even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more on this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
Today in the Data Mines, we take a look at seizure data. We're getting this information from the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. And the latest data for marijuana seizures shows that in 2015, we had the least amount of Mexican marijuana seized at the border in over a decade. That's right, folks. Legalization is doing to the Mexican drug cartels what decades of drug war has been unable to accomplish. And that's because legalization recognizes that no matter what you do, no matter what laws you pass, no matter how many guns and helicopters you throw at the problem, you cannot repeal the law of supply and demand. People in America want marijuana. Now, for a long time, that marijuana has been supplied in bulk, and some pretty lousy marijuana, supplied in bulk by the Mexican drug cartels. It's unknown exactly how much marijuana makes up their business, but some estimates say as high as 60% of their business. I don't think it's that much, but still, whatever it is, it's a segment of business that they should not profit from. Taking a look at the figures, over the past 10 years, the average seizure has been about 2.5 million pounds at our southern border. Going back to 2006, it was about 2.25 million. 2007, about 3.25 million. 2008, about 2.75. 2009 was the highest year on record for the past 10 years anyway, at about 3.75 million pounds of marijuana. And since 2009, it has gone steadily downward with one exception. So in 2010, below 3.5. In 2011, at 2.5. In 2012, 2.25. 2013, a slight, tiny increase back up to about 2.5. And remember, 2013 would be the first year that legal possession was available in Washington and Colorado, and legal cultivation in Colorado. So 2013, about 2.5 million. And each year since 2013, it's dropped by about 500,000 pounds. In 2014, less than 2 million pounds. And last year's number was also the least amount of marijuana in the past 10 years, until that record was broken this year at 1.5 million pounds. So we're a full 1 million pounds lower than the decade average of 2.5 million pounds. And of course, much of this has to be the fault of legalization, and especially as 2014 and 2015 allowed for the purchase of marijuana within stores. That's just in Washington and Colorado, folks, that has caused this massive drop. Part of that also is because the massive drop in seizures is related to the massive increase in production in America, whether it is in the legal states or not. But the legal states also lead to a decrease in the price. And the lower the price, the less the Mexican cartels can compete as well. According to a Mexican marijuana grower on NPR back in December 2014, he says 2 or 3 years ago, a kilo of marijuana was worth $60 to $90, but now they're paying $30 to $40 a kilo. So for the farmer in Mexico, he's getting half what he used to get for his crops. And he says, quote, "If the U.S. continues to legalize pot, they'll run us into the ground," end quote. And it's not just the price of marijuana, it's the quality of marijuana as well. Nobody wants to buy the Mexican dirt weed anymore. The marijuana being produced in the United States is far better. And it brings into question also our U.S. Customs and Border Patrol and how much of their workload is based on seizing marijuana. I've got a report here from the Center for Investigative Reporting that shows that 4 out of 5 Border Patrol drug busts involve U.S. citizens. You know that, Steve King, the representative from Iowa, who said, the Mexicans are bringing the marijuana across the border and they got calves the size of cantaloupes because they're hauling these, huge bales of weed. It just ain't so. 4 out of 5 of the people getting caught for drug busts are U.S. citizens. Overall immigration from Mexico is at a negative now. More people are leaving the United States going to Mexico than Mexicans are coming into the United States. And we continue to see the overall amount of marijuana being seized drop year after year. It's also something of note that the U.S. Border Patrol has the jurisdiction to operate within 100 miles of the U.S. border. And that counts not just the southern border with Mexico, not just the northern border with Canada, but also our coastlines on the East Coast, the West Coast, and the Gulf Coast. It also counts the coastlines around Alaska, and of course all of Hawaii, because all of Hawaii is within 100 miles of its coast. Because of this 100-mile jurisdiction, and because of the fact that so many of our largest cities, 9 out of 10 of them, are within 100 miles of the coast, it makes it so that 2/3 of the United States population lives within this 100-mile zone where the Border Patrol is allowed to operate freely. And not just setting up permanent roadblocks where they can stop you without cause and search you without cause, but they can also set up temporary traveling sorts of roadblocks. And again, we're talking about a federal police force that does not have to obey the Fourth Amendment when they're searching you, because it's supposedly for homeland security and protecting our border. Learn more about the Border Patrol, folks. All right, we're going to take a break. Learn more about women, menopause, and cannabis when we come back.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
The next generation of vaporizers has arrived. Vuber vaporizers are blazing the way with unparalleled technology for oil, concentrate, or dry flower pens. Providing unsurpassed customer service and expert craftsmanship, Vuber vaporizers use cutting-edge technology, providing a power-packed, smoother vapor with a lifetime guarantee. Experience vaporizing the way it was meant to be. The Vuber way.
This is the Russ Belville Show, annoying Kevin Sabet since 2012.
Tokers, there's no good reason to get your dog stoned. While it might not harm them physically, imagine being a dog who already begs for treats all day, and then imagine that dog having the munchies. Not cool. Don't want to spend money on a night out, but don't know what to do other than watching TV or playing video games? Consider playing guitar, bass, banjo, or mandolin. The instrument will give you hours of entertainment with friends with minimal expense. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
It's time for the Russ Belville Show's Cannabis Q&A with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. Dr. Earlywine is a professor of psychology at the State University of New York at Albany and a leading author and researcher on cannabinoids and health, who pins the Ask Dr. Mitch column for High Times magazine. Get your questions ready in our live chat or call in to 971-533-7111 now.
Welcome back, everyone. 32 after the hour, and today we got a special edition of our Cannabis Q&A. Dr. Mitch won't be joining us today. Instead, one of his proteges is with us. Melissa Slavin is on the line. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
Are you hearing me okay?
Yeah, can you hear me well?
Yep, you're doing just fine. Thanks so much.
Okay, good.
So we're really excited. First of all, are you Dr. Melissa yet, or are you just Melissa?
No, I'm just Melissa, yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say just Melissa. You're very special to us.
Thank you.
So this is some interesting information for us because a very good friend of our show, Lisa is her name, long ago when we did this segment with Dr. Mitch, asked questions about menopause and cannabis and whether or not, she said she gets some relief from it, but wanted to know if there's any data. And Dr. Mitch kind of went, hey, that's a good question. So can you tell us where this question evolved into the work that you've done?
Yeah, sure. So basically, we were looking at just current treatments for menopause, and we see that there's not that many both safe and effective treatments. And also a lot of the treatments out there just focus on like one symptom over a lot of others. So hot flashes mainly is the treatment, is the focus of a lot of treatments. So there's hormone replacement therapy. It decreases hot flashes, but there's a lot of associated risks. Antidepressants, it shows some efficacy, but there's still a lot of side effects. And again, just the focus on hot flashes over other symptoms like insomnia, irritability, depression, and joint pain, all of those symptoms influence one another. So we're looking at mostly a holistic treatment plan that can address more than one symptom and then hopefully kind of be able to help others just through affecting one symptom as well.
That's very, very interesting. So you've done some preliminary research on this, and did Lisa's anecdotal stories match the data? Did people find relief from this?
Yeah. So basically, what we did, we surveyed around 115 menopausal and postmenopausal women. We asked them about their marijuana use, both frequency and quantity. We asked them about their menopause symptoms, their expectancies that they had about marijuana treating those symptoms, and any sort of cannabis-related problems that they had. And basically what we found from this is that these women did expect, they had meaningful expectancies that marijuana would help treat each of these menopause symptoms, everything except for bladder problems. So the symptoms we have listed, it's joint muscle discomfort, irritability, sleep problems, depression, anxiety, hot flashes, and sex problems, heart discomfort, exhaustion, vaginal dryness, and bladder problems. So we then looked specifically pairing up these expectancies, seeing which ones were actually held to be more meaningful. And we found, again, that these women expected it to treat symptoms that were already treated by medical marijuana, such as irritability, sleep problems, depression, anxiety, and even hot flashes was actually endorsed. So we then looked at their use, their cannabis use. And what we found is that these symptoms actually did predict whether or not, more so frequency of use rather than quantity. So we measured frequency in days per month. So basically, if someone had a higher amount of symptoms, they were more likely to use more days per month. We then looked at those expectancies that they had towards marijuana treating these symptoms, and we found it actually mediated this relationship. So basically what that means is it's just accounting for that relationship. If someone's going to have high expectancies that marijuana will treat these symptoms, they're going to end up using more days per month than someone who does not hold high expectancies. And what we also found was pretty interesting is that it did not actually relate to problems. So we did a regression analysis. We put symptoms, we put expectancies, what else did we put? Frequency of use as well as intoxication we used as a proxy for quantity. And the only actual variable to predict problems was intoxication, which we kind of took as an indicator of quantity. So frequency of use, symptoms, and expectancies did not even, they did not predict problems, showing that you can actually use at least even frequently, more days per month, and still not experience problems if you're, doing it correctly and you have expectancies that it's going to treat the right symptoms and going off of that.
How did you manage to evaluate this data with respect to the people's, frequency of use of cannabis, or I should say their background with it? I mean, is it confounding that you might be dealing with people who've been using marijuana for a long time and there's some placebo effect versus having a control group that's never used marijuana and then gets a chance to try it against these symptoms? Can you outline that for us?
Yeah, well, actually, currently we're going to be doing work on that. We're going to be using a sample from Craigslist. So it's going to be, and this is on, actually now we're doing PMS work, so it's going to be a little bit of a more comparison group. A lot of the sample was from normal or just people that might be associated with, just interested in legalization of marijuana. So it might have some sort of bias, but at the same time, we also ask these individuals, like how often do you use? We ask them if they use primarily for menopause. So we kind of took a lot of factors into account to see that it was varied enough. But again, we're going to continue the research with other samples just to kind of verify that.
Okay, what are the, for people that don't know, what are the mechanisms behind menopause? What is causing these symptoms, and what do you hypothesize cannabis is doing to alleviate those symptoms?
Well, I mean, generally the symptoms that we're focusing on here, again, are the ones we know that marijuana has been shown to treat already. So we have irritability, joint pain, insomnia, even like depression, anxiety, and again, hot flashes was actually endorsed. So that's an interesting topic too to be further studied. The mechanisms behind them, primarily for menopause, I'm not sure if it would be completely different than it would be just in and of itself having those symptoms. So we're kind of just looking at it like that. Like we've seen in the past, medical marijuana has treated these symptoms. So now, can it treat these symptoms in the context of menopause? And again, our hypothesis with hot flashes is that because these symptoms so often do exacerbate one another, so if I'm trying to give an example specifically, but I mean, something can influence hot flashes if you don't have enough sleep or if you're stressed out. So, treating one of these symptoms might actually influence these other symptoms as well.
I see. Okay, so that's making some sense to me. We're speaking with Melissa Slavin, as she is a student of Dr. Mitch Earlywine's here on the Cannabis Q&A, and we're discussing the use of cannabis for women that are suffering the effects of menopause. You also mentioned that you're starting up some research on PMS. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yep. So we're basically doing the same study. We're just asking now about PMS symptoms, PMDD symptoms. So a lot of them are very similar to some of the menopause symptoms we have there. We're expecting pretty similar results in regard to irritability, some sleep problems, what else? We have anxiety. So basically a few of those we're expecting that definitely people use marijuana for and that they expect it to help. So it's going to be essentially the same design as the same one for the menopause.
All right. And another female-specific treatment we've heard for cannabis is for the treatment of cramps, of menstrual cramps. This goes back to Queen Victoria in the lore. Is that something that you're planning on looking at as well?
So that's interesting. I actually wrote about that. We are doing some research as to when the idea of marijuana for women's problems first came up. And I saw that there was a lot of historical accounts of it being used for cramps, and even like during child's birth, there was some stuff. So there was a bunch of information. We are going to ask about that. So we do ask cramps as a potential symptom in PMS and PMDD. So that is going to be information we'll find out, and we'll see whether or not people expect it to help, and just based on their use, based on those expectancies.
It's fascinating to me, and I'm wondering, just generally speaking, the metabolization of cannabinoids and their effects on people. Is there any marked differences between how they affect or they're metabolized between men and women?
So that I'm not entirely sure about, so I don't want to speak of just yet. But it's definitely going to be something that will be noted in the next study for sure, because it is something, and we're going to be doing a whole literature review for marijuana for a bunch of different women's issues. So not just even PMS, like we were thinking endometriosis and things like that. So it would be interesting to know whether or not it is metabolized differently. So still something to consider for us.
Yeah, another thing when it comes to cannabis and women's issues here in the state of Oregon, our dispensaries have to issue a little warning, a piece of paper that says it may be bad for breastfeeding or for the fetus in utero. Any desire to look at that data and include that in your next round as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good area to include. So I will be doing that for sure.
Well, that's excellent. And I'm sure people will have plenty of questions about this and maybe even want to contribute their own anecdotal information. Do you have any contact information you'd like to give out if people want to help out?
Yeah, sure. I can give my specific email address, or I can give generally just the study email address. So it's both Mitch and mine. So I could probably do that. It would be 420research@gmail.com.
Okay, 420research@gmail.com. Our listeners know that as the Dr. Mitch email address, so they should be familiar.
And I can give mine specifically too. I don't know if you want that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So mine is MN and then SLAVIN @gmail.com. Melissa.
Okay, mnslavin@gmail.com.
Yep.
Fantastic. And is this the first major bit of work that you've been in charge of in your career?
Especially with medical marijuana, it has been. I've done some work with addictive behaviors and like looking at gambling and more so behaviors, and that really interested me. And so I think this line of research is kind of it's interesting because it's obviously a substance, but it's something in which there shouldn't necessarily be that addictive component in the same way as other substances. So it's kind of like an interesting border between those two lines of research.
I completely agree. Well, Melissa, thank you for joining us on the show, filling in Dr. Mitch's enormous shoes, metaphorically speaking. And good luck on the future research. We'll look forward to breaking the news on that when you get some more data in.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, Melissa, thank you.
All right, bye.
Stay tuned, folks. We've got a radical rant coming up. They've canceled the 420 Cannabis Cup for Denver. Geez, where can you have a Cannabis Cup these days? Seattle, Portland, Denver? Nope, nope, and nope. We'll talk about that and the future when we return.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Great websites today need expert web design and development and need to be e-commerce ready and mobile friendly. But building a marketable and profitable website can be an uphill climb. Ready to make your new website or replace your existing website? Think Orange as the new way to get in the black. Orange Hill Development works with Fortune 500 companies and offer the same top quality development service at a fraction of what other providers charge. Brands like Absolute, Carlsberg, and Nestea trust Orange Hill Development. Find out why you should trust your website with Orange Hill. Contact Orange Hill for a consultation today at orangehilldevelopment.com.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
As it relates to my brother, there's one thing I know for sure. He kept us safe.
Okay. Maybe you're high, too.
Doc Rob, the concierge for better living.
Cannabis is just one of the many great plants that we have on this planet called Earth that we can use consciously and intelligently to improve our well-being.
Take a real, raw, inside look at healthier living while sharing great ideas and improvements for a better quality of life.
Learning to live and live well is a lifelong process. This is a journey. You could be 80 years old or 8 years old. You can still learn something that's going to make tomorrow a little bit healthier, a little bit easier, a little bit happier, a little bit better.
The concierge for better living with Doc Rob. Only on CannabisRadio.com.
Coming soon to a city near you, Cannabis Finance Boot Camp. Get all your cannabis accounting, legal, and compliance questions answered by their knowledgeable panel of industry experts who want to help your cannabis business boom. Whether you're a grower, dispensary operator, or a newcomer to the field, your cannabis business needs Cannabis Finance Boot Camp. For information on upcoming events, visit CannabisFinanceBootCamp.com.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
Well. Once again, they have canceled a cannabis cup. This time it's in Pueblo, Colorado, which was the backup plan to try to get it scheduled for somewhere around 420. They, of course, were originally going to be in Denver, Colorado, where they've had cannabis cups for quite a long time now, at least 4 years that I can think of. And unfortunately, there will be no cannabis cup. The Denver Mart would not issue the permit. The Adams County people who didn't want to have it permitted, said there was way too much traffic. There was minors that were using. They couldn't keep it under control, yada, 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 whatever the excuse is. And this is concerning to me because this now makes it 3 for 3 of the legal cities in America where High Times can't hold a cannabis cup. Portland, Seattle, and Denver. The capitals, if you will, of the 3 legal states that currently have commerce in marijuana cannot hold a cannabis cup. What the hell kind of legalization is that? And it becomes even more disturbing when you recognize that these cities, all 3 of them, well, Portland never had a cannabis cup, but Seattle and Denver have had numerous cannabis cups already. And they began as medical cannabis cups. So these cities had cannabis cups before marijuana was even legal. And it was a medical cannabis cup, right? So it just feels weird to me that we've made marijuana more legal, but these cities have felt they've had to be more restrictive about it. It's like their dying gasp of prohibition. Their last pushback to try to mess with us in some sort of way. And it's just frustrating as hell. Now, I can already hear the stoners against legalization, the true legalizers, bitching. See, we told you it wasn't true legalization. See? Well, the problem, though, is that the alternative to that would be that we shouldn't have voted for Initiative 502, Measure 91, and Amendment 64. And I don't think anybody thinks that's the right idea, that we should go back to being illegal. What this shows us is not that those legalization votes were wrong, or even necessarily that those first legalization ballots were flawed, although there were some flaws. It just shows us that legalization is a process. Legalization is a marathon, not a sprint. Legalization is the means by which we get toward freedom. And we're not at freedom yet. We're not even close to where we should be freedom-wise. And that's the points the stoners against legalization bring up all the time when they criticize this or that legalization initiative is, well, it still allows people to go to jail for weed, or it doesn't release all the pot prisoners, or whatever the complaint might be. And you have to just say, yeah, you're right. But it does stop the arrest of, and then whatever it makes legal, an ounce or less, 6 plants or less, whatever it might be. 6 plants or fewer, I should say. And it's a process. And you know, it's like the Emancipation Proclamation was not true freedom. In 1863, when Lincoln emancipated the Africans who were being held as slaves, it did not equal freedom. There was still 100 years or so where the freed slaves couldn't vote, had poll taxes levied against them, couldn't hold certain jobs, had to sit in the back of the bus, had to use a different water fountain. That wasn't freedom. Hell, the right for black and white people to marry each other in all 50 states didn't happen until 1967. I was a fetus in 1967 when Loving v. Virginia was heard by the Supreme Court. So, I mean, that's a long time. That's a long span between freedom from slavery and freedom to marry. Okay? And that doesn't mean that you reject the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, especially if you're one of the slaves. Can you imagine one of the slaves saying, yeah, Mr. Lincoln, it's all great. You want to free the slaves and all, but can we marry white women? No. Well, take it back. That's not true freedom. That would be ridiculous and tragic, wouldn't it? So no, it's not that we legalize the wrong way. No matter how we legalize, there'd be something to fix, is my point. And as these legalization initiatives go on, they get better and better. We're seeing the latest ones include cannabis cafes and pot lounges and ways of licensing public sort of events. In fact, by 2017, it might be Portland, Seattle, and Denver being the only places in legal states where you can't hold a cannabis cup. It's confusing how this happened. Let me break it down. So Seattle, they couldn't hold the cannabis cup in Seattle because the state passed a law. After the legalization law passed, they passed another law felonizing cannabis clubs. They were upset because people were opening up clubs or bars, existing bars were opening up sections where adults could show up and smoke cannabis. And they had to turn that into a felony because, you know, if people gather together in a building to consume cannabis, you know, what? What is it that happens? They were happening. These things were going on. These, you know, Frankie's Club and other places were going on for quite a while. And there were no increase in wrecks. There were no, nuisance calls from neighbors. There were no problems. Certainly nothing compared to your typical bar on a Saturday night. I mean, I've covered these hemp fests in Seattle for 10 years where they have hundreds of thousands of people openly smoking pot, some of them even doing dabs. And there's no problems. There's no issues. You don't have to take my word for it. Ask a cop, ask an EMT, ask a nurse whether they'd rather cover a pot event or an alcohol event. It's just, It blows my mind that Seattle, Washington would freak out about there being a place where pot smokers are gathering after being ID'd even and searched. They'd have a problem with that. But Seattle has literally hundreds of buildings built for the express purpose of administering mind-altering and performance-decreasing drugs to adults for entertainment. These buildings have parking lots for the express purpose of storing the vehicles of those adults while they alter their minds and decrease their performance with drugs inside the drug building. Seattle then trusts the drug building owners to not administer too much drugs to the adults, and Seattle trusts the adults to judge the degree of their mind alteration and decreased performance before returning to the parking lots to operate their vehicles. Seattle even allows for a tolerable degree of mind alteration and decreased performance for adults operating vehicles on the road after taking drugs in the drug buildings, knowing that this tolerance comes at the cost of thousands of deaths on the roads. But because we call the drugs alcohol and the buildings bars, none of that's a felony in Washington. In Portland, they can't have a cannabis cup, or for that matter, a cannabis cafe, because they amended the Oregon Clean Air Act to include vaporization and cannabinoids. So anywhere you can't smoke tobacco indoors, you can't smoke cannabis or vaporize cannabis or even use e-cigarettes for nicotine. Now, the rationale behind the Oregon Clean Air Act was the workplaces and the workers and the poor servers and the smoky bars are going to be inhaling secondhand smoke. And scientifically, we've shown that secondhand smoke's a problem, so this was a safety protocol to protect workers' lungs. Never mind that we still allow coal mining in West Virginia. Forget that for a moment. But the problem is, we don't have science showing any sort of comparable harms from secondhand cannabis smoke, much less cannabis vaporization. Dr. Tashkin's work found that cannabis smokers, and that's inhaling firsthand cannabis smoke, showed lower risk for lung cancer than even non-smokers. And of course, vaporization doesn't even produce smoke. So there's no science to show that cannabis smoke or vaporization produces the tobacco-like harms that the Clean Air Act was based upon. And that's not even a point we have to defend. That's beside the real point, which is that same Clean Air Act has exemptions within it to allow for tobacco smoking at smoke shops and cigar bars. So somehow we can allow these alcohol buildings with parking lots, and we can allow these tobacco buildings where smoking of the real harmful shit's allowed, but we can't have a cannabis cup, we can't have a cannabis cafe. The other thing that messed up trying to get a permit in Portland, okay, so you figure, well, let's have it in a big venue or an outdoor or something like that. Here's the other problem. The OLCC, our Liquor Control Commission that runs marijuana, decided that any venue that has a liquor license is a public place. And under our law, you cannot consume cannabis in public view. And if you're in a public place, then you're in public view. Now, this doesn't mean you can't hold a cannabis cup where there's alcohol being served. It means any place that has a liquor license, whether they're using it at the time or not. Well, pretty much every private ballroom and every big area that would have parking lots and the ability to hold a massive cannabis cup has a liquor license, even if they're not using it. So that pretty much wipes out all the places you could have a cannabis cup in Portland. And in Denver, again, they've got all these crazy imagined harms that they'll point out for 10 or 20,000 cannabis consumers once a year. But they'll turn a blind eye to the shenanigans of 76,000 people drinking beer at Mile High Stadium or Coors Field. Coors freaking Field! It's named after beer! Well, Denver Normal's going forth with their city initiative. Maybe they'll get pot lounges legalized. Good luck, Denver Normal. For everyone here at CannabisRadio.com, I'm Radical Russ. Stay tuned for Hour 2. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.